I'm Mabel. I still remember that cold Wednesday morning when the federal agents showed up at our apartment door. My husband, Ryan, opened it, and his expression shifted from confusion to sheer panic in an instant. They told him he was required to appear for questioning regarding financial misconduct and falsified business records at his advertising firm, Ryan and Associates. I watched from the hallway mirror, my face as still as a statue. Before that fateful morning, my world was filled with hopes and dreams. Ryan and I had been married for 10 years, and it had been a long, arduous journey trying to start a family. We'd endured countless fertility treatments, injections, and consultations. The hope that had once burned bright had slowly dimmed with each failed attempt. But then, one morning, everything changed. A positive pregnancy test showed that I was 4 weeks pregnant. It was like a miracle, a dream come true after a decade of heartbreak. I knew I wanted to tell Ryan in a special way. He had been so caught up in his company's upcoming celebration at the Grand Lakeside Hotel. For weeks, he'd been talking about it non-stop, obsessing over every little detail. The grandeur and drama of the place seemed like the perfect setting for this unforgettable surprise. I rented a simple black catering uniform and carefully prepared myself in front of the mirror in our bedroom. I tucked my hair into a low bun, applied light makeup, and placed the pregnancy confirmation letter in the inside pocket of my blazer. I whispered to my reflection, "Tonight, he'll finally know." When I arrived at the hotel, the lobby was filled with a golden glow reflecting off the magnificent ceiling murals. Well-dressed guests entered wearing evening gowns and tailored suits, exuding the confidence that came from successful careers in New York's cutthroat corporate world. I kept my head down and made my way to the service entrance. No one paid me any attention, just as I had hoped. Inside the grand ballroom, the celebration was in full swing. The sound of jazz music filled the air, and guests were chatting, laughing, and toasting to another milestone for Ryan and Associates. I scanned the crowd, looking for Ryan. I finally spotted him in the center of the room, dressed impeccably in a charcoal gray suit. But he seemed off. He wasn't his usual charming self, mingling with clients and colleagues. Instead, he stood there, a drink in his hand, his eyes constantly fixed on the ballroom entrance. My chest tightened. He looked tense, as if he was waiting for someone important, and I had a sinking feeling it wasn't me. His fingers drummed against the glass, a nervous habit he only had when he was anxious. Every time a new guest entered, he'd stand up a bit straighter, only to slump back with disappointment. I tried to convince myself that he was just stressed from work. His company was expanding, and he'd been chasing a new partnership for months. Maybe he was expecting an investor or a colleague. I decided to get closer. I weaved through the servers, holding an empty tray to blend in. I needed to place the envelope on his champagne tray, close enough for him to discover it naturally. But as I got closer, I noticed something that made my hopes start to fade. Ryan checked the entrance again, and his whole demeanor changed when a young woman entered the ballroom. She was no more than 22 years old, with a natural air of confidence that came from a privileged upbringing. Her silver satin dress clung to her slender body, and her long, wavy hair cascaded down her back. She was Olivia, the daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, a powerful family in New York real estate. I recognized her from the articles Ryan had shown me months ago when he first mentioned the possibility of collaborating with the Thompsons. At the time, it had seemed like a business opportunity. Landing them could take his agency to new heights. But he'd never mentioned meeting Olivia. As soon as Ryan saw her, he set down his drink and practically rushed towards her. A smile spread across his face, a smile I hadn't seen directed at me in months. He placed his hand on the small of her back, and she looked up at him adoringly, her hand lingering on his forearm. My fingers tightened around the champagne flute I was holding. I forced myself to keep moving, to blend in with the other servers. As I got closer, I heard whispers from nearby tables. "They look perfect together," one woman said. "Everyone at the office knows they've been seeing each other for months." My heart felt like it was being ripped apart. I tried to convince myself that I had misheard, but the whispers continued. I edged closer to Ryan and Olivia. They had moved to a more private corner of the ballroom. Ryan was saying, "I promise it won't be long. The divorce papers are already being drafted. I'll be free soon." Those words hit me like a bullet. I felt like the ground was disappearing beneath my feet. Olivia leaned in and said, "I trust you, but my parents are serious. They won't sign any deals with you until it's official." Ryan replied quickly, "I understand. Once everything is finalized, we can move forward with the partnership and our future together." I backed away, my steps slow and deliberate. I made my way to the service corridor, and as soon as the door closed behind me, the warmth and noise of the ballroom faded away. I leaned against the wall, my legs trembling. I reached into my blazer and pulled out the envelope with the pregnancy confirmation. The paper shook in my hands. This was supposed to be a moment of joy, a shared dream. But now, it felt like a heavy burden. I stayed in the corridor until my breathing calmed down. But I needed to know why. Why had he betrayed me after all these years? Why was he willing to throw away our marriage for a shortcut to wealth and status? When I got home that night, I entered Ryan's office. It used to be a place where we'd share our dreams for the future of his agency. But now, it felt cold and sterile, designed to impress clients and hide his secrets. I switched on the desk lamp and started going through the folders. I found some disturbing things. There were payments to a consulting firm with no verifiable details. The amounts were large and seemed suspicious. As I dug deeper, I discovered patterns of payments through shell companies, clients involved in scandals, and invoices for services that seemed unethical. I pulled out my phone and Googled the client names. 2 were associated with SEC investigations, and 1 was linked to a major embezzlement case. Hidden beneath a stack of reports, I found a thin envelope with handwritten notes in Ryan's script. They were instructions for creating fake testimonials, burying negative search results, and generating false social media metrics to boost client status. It was clear that Ryan and Associates wasn't just doing PR, it was engaged in corrupt practices. I also found details about the upcoming partnership with the Thompsons. Ryan was clearly trying to use them to transform his agency and his social status, no matter what the cost. I quietly photographed all the documents, knowing that if the Thompsons saw them, they'd cut ties with Ryan immediately. 2 days later, I decided to take action. I dressed in a professional, unremarkable outfit and used an alias, Lily Stone, from an old freelance project. I went to the Thompson Model Agency, located in a sleek glass, paneled building. I told the receptionist I was there to discuss potential collaboration opportunities with Mrs. Thompson. Although I didn't have an appointment, Mrs. Thompson was between meetings and agreed to see me for a few minutes. In a quiet seating area, I started the conversation, complimenting the Thompson brand's reputation and integrity. Then, I casually mentioned that not all agencies in New York's advertising scene operated with the same ethical standards. I talked about firms that engaged in off-the-book deals and reputation laundering, without naming names. I could see the suspicion in her eyes as I spoke. A short time later, I got an appointment with Mr. Thompson. He was a powerful and imposing figure. I showed him the evidence I'd gathered about Ryan's corrupt practices. He examined the documents carefully, his jaw tightening with each page. After verifying the details, he was furious. I told him that I wanted 2 things. First, Ryan should face the legal consequences of his actions. Second, I wanted financial security for my unborn child so that they wouldn't be affected by Ryan's mistakes. Mr. Thompson agreed. He said he'd ensure the downfall of Ryan's scheme and protect my child's future. 3 days later, the storm hit Ryan's agency. IRS agents and the Department of Revenue representatives arrived at the office, demanding access to his financial records. His employees were in a panic, and clients started to pull out their accounts. Ryan was in complete shock. He tried to call Olivia, but she distanced herself from him. When he went to the Thompson estate, he was refused entry. By the end of the day, his agency was in ruins. His carefully constructed world was collapsing around him, and he had no idea that it was me who had orchestrated it all. The next morning, the agents returned and arrested Ryan for federal tax fraud, wire fraud, and falsification of business records. As I watched him being led away in handcuffs, I didn't feel relief or triumph. I just felt exhausted, like I was closing a long and painful chapter of my life. After that, I moved into a small, sunlit apartment in Brooklyn. Mr. Thompson had arranged for the purchase through a trust to protect my privacy and my child's future. It was a quiet place, free from the chaos and deceit of my old life. During my pregnancy, I was unexpectedly contacted by Dr. Ethan Reed, my fertility specialist. He had been with me through all the difficult times of infertility. He reached out to offer support during my pregnancy, with no expectations. I hesitated at first, but eventually, I agreed to meet him for coffee. When I saw him in the cafe, he still had that warm, gentle demeanor. We talked for hours, and he never asked about Ryan. He just cared about my well-being, about how I was sleeping and eating. As my due date approached, Ethan became an important part of my life. He drove me to prenatal appointments, helped me assemble the baby's crib, and was there for me when I was feeling scared. When I went into labor, I instinctively called him. He was at the hospital within minutes, holding my hand through every contraction. When my son, Benjamin, was born, Ethan was the first to place his hand on Benjamin's back. It was a moment of pure relief and joy. In the background, Ryan's fate unfolded quietly. He accepted a plea deal and was sentenced to federal prison. He never learned who had given the evidence to the Thompsons, and he never knew that he had a son. Now, as I sit in my apartment with Benjamin in my arms, and Ethan by my side, I know that this is the life I've chosen. It's a life of healing, motherhood, and the first honest companionship I've had in a long time. The past is behind me, and I'm looking forward to a brighter future.